She pulled up in a spotless SUV like she owned the Sunrise clipboard, held high perfume cutting through diesel and morning dew, and told me flat as a judge's gavel, "Shut it down today." She actually said cap it in 48 hours or $500 a day, like she was reading a menu, not threatening the only thing keeping my cows alive. I stared at her and thought, this is either the worst comedy I've ever seen or a cold, well-planned takeover. I'm Samuel Caldwell. This is my 40-acre spread in Millbrook County, Texas, third-generation rancher, stubborn by heredity, and until that morning mostly minding my own business, and a drought that had my cattle looking like they'd been dieting for a year. While most guys unwind with a game, I spent 3 years hunched over legal texts, leases, riparian law, county records, because once you start hearing city planners whisper development, your spine tenses for a reason. The smell of old paper and dust hit me like luck in a bank vault the day I found my grandfather's deed, a 1924 thing with ink faded but iron strong. It guaranteed subsurface water rights to our family heirs, not a suggestion, not a wish, but a legal fact. Jake Morrison. My high school friend turned lawyer whistled when he saw it. "This predates everything they can throw at you," he said. "I filed permits. I hired a driller." ACWell rolled in metal, screaming into the cracked pasture, and for the first time in months, I felt like maybe my cattle would stop licking dry troughs. Then Delilah Thornberry stepped out of her Escalade like she was about to rebuke the Sun Designer blazer manicure that never knew a barn and the kind of look that says you have opinions and they cost. She ran Pinehaven Estates, the suburban fortress that had somehow annexed part of my land last year during a boundary redraw, which at that point I thought was bureaucratic noise. Turns out it was the beginning of a war. "This industrial noise is unacceptable," she announced, heels sinking into my clay like little flags. She thrust a cease and desist at me, paperwork that read like a script violation of covenants, required HOA approval, $500 daily fines. She called my livestock well industrial extraction. I almost laughed, except then she mentioned liens and legal fees and a pattern of shutting down rural operations. My stomach went cold. She wasn't improvising, she was running a playbook. I didn't have to guess why. Over 3 years of study, I'd seen how power works. When suburban developments get hungry for pristine property values, they sharpen rules into weapons. But I'd also learned how to fight bureaucracy with paperwork, precedent, and patience. When Jake barreled up my drive 2 days later with sweat on his forehead and an injunction under his arm, the fight moved from the pasture to the courthouse. In court, Delilah performed with the confidence of someone used to getting what she wanted. "Your Honor," she said, "this operation threatens groundwater, violates environmental protocols, and harms property values." Her lawyer had a stack of exhibits, glossy photos of my modest wellhead, captions that made a livestock pump look like an oil rig. The Judge Hartwell by name managed a sleepy disdain that suggested he saw me as a minor inconvenience. He owned rental properties in Pinehaven. Coincidences like that make you taste iron. But I had my own arsenal. Dr. Sarah Palmer, a state hydrologist I'd consulted years ago, had mapped our aquifer. The report showed my supply pulled from a different layer entirely 43 feet below the Trinity Formation and not connected to their residential system. I spread county records on the table, showed permits, the 1924 deed, my state agricultural exemption. And then Danny, my cousin at County Records, handed over something that landed like a thunderclap. Pinehaven's own construction had drained millions during development without a single environmental assessment filed. Judge Hartwell read, blinked, and denied Delilah's emergency motion. We walked out with a legal win, and then Delilah smiled, a slow, dangerous thing, and whispered threats in the hallway like someone promising future weather. The victory tasted like pennies. It was clean but temporary. She had money and time and a habit of turning loss into a new strategy. She started funding a war chest from HOA assessment special fees for community defense that were due within 30 days. Suddenly my phone didn't stop ringing. Tom Patterson, whose wife had panic attacks over the bill. Betty Morse, elderly and trembling at the idea of a lien on her Social Security-funded house. Delilah had turned legal defeat into neighborhood terror. Make your neighbors pay and they'll turn on you. Next came the complaints, anonymous tips about contamination, livestock illness, weird smells. County Inspector Janet Mills showed up with a testing kit and a face that said she hated false alarms as much as real ones. I handed her every test I'd run, vet records logs, 3 months of data that made municipal water look sketchy. She took her samples away and 2 days later called with a tone I'd been waiting to hear. "Marcus, your water exceeds state standards." She recommended my well for county emergency drought relief. The narrative Delilah tried to spin was falling apart. But she kept spinning. She had publicity and influence. Anonymous press releases showed up in the local paper. HOA meetings filled with nervous neighbors. A special meeting where she presented enlarged photos of my pump like a public hazard poster. I walked into that room with the county health report in my pocket and the patience of a man who'd read the rule book twice. I read the findings out loud. Water quality fine, zero contamination, and announced that my well would be available for mutual aid. Silence followed, the kind that feels like a held breath across 60 people. Then the real cracks in her empire showed. Tom and Betty had been digging into HOA finances because they were scared, and because fear makes you look. What they found wasn't common bookkeeping errors. It was embezzlement, unauthorized legal expenses, private investigator bills, environmental contracts that lined Delilah's strategy against rural neighbors. $18,000 here, $12,000 there. Money siphoned from association fees into personal vendettas. The taste of vindication is metallic and sharp. She didn't stop. She hired a private environmental team, expensive gear, white lab coats, the whole theater to prove contamination. They set up like an occupying force, tested and retested. But Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the consultant Delilah paid, finished her analysis and calmly told me she had to report facts. "Your water quality exceeds every standard we test for." Watching Delilah pay for evidence that cleared me felt like watching someone buy a rope to hang themselves. By then, Danny had found something better than tests, the original 1987 incorporation map. Under fluorescent courthouse lights, the faded ink showed my 40 acres explicitly excluded from HOA jurisdiction. Agricultural use block letters. The 2023 annexation. Filed by Delilah as HOA president. Yes, but without the required notices to affected landowners. No 30-day notice. No consent. Fraud under color of authority. 7 other agricultural properties had been annexed the same way, and those families had been systematically harassed until they sold or left. Once you realize the playbook, the pattern becomes a machine. False complaints, bogus annexation, fines, harassment, forced sales. It's organized intimidation wrapped in suburban respectability. I spread the evidence across my kitchen table, original maps, forged filings, bank statements showing HOA, money used for private investigations. The picture was ugly and clear. This wasn't just HOA overreach. It smelled like organized misconduct, and federal statute sat squarely in its path. We set a trap. We gathered the affected families, documented everything, called prosecutors and federal investigators, and prepared a presentation so tight it would make a prosecutor grin. We printed the maps, the ledgers, the timelines, and projected every lie Delilah had told into the room where she planned to parade her power. I even put up cameras at the community center to capture whatever theatrics she would attempt. The day of the HOA meeting, she tried to shut us down with an emergency court filing, restraining orders, and claims we'd intimidate the neighborhood. Typical grenade throwing. But when the sheriff's deputies arrived with a temporary restraining order, something else happened. A woman with a federal badge stepped forward, Special Agent Catherine Walsh, FBI White Collar Division. "Your complaints triggered a federal investigation," she said, and Delilah's theater began to fray in front of 60 faces. Delilah melted into confession. She blamed me for poisoning groundwater, for destroying property values, for spending HOA funds on investigations for the children. She said she'd gotten rid of farms proudly, as if eviction were public service. Her mouth kept moving, and with every word she admitted more. Tom stood, laid out bank records, and the room watched a local official become a criminal in real time. When the evidence, county records, environmental reports, financial statements, was projected on the wall, the color drained from faces that had been nodding along for 2 years. Dr. Mitchell stepped up with her report, "No environmental concerns." Agent Walsh read the charges. The handcuffs clicked. Delilah's last words were small and honest. "I just wanted the farms gone, all of them, forever." The aftermath was cleaner than any victory I'd imagined. She pled guilty to conspiracy, fraud, and violating protections for agricultural land. Restitution covered the stolen HOA funds. Federal penalties totaled more than $500,000. But the real work healing a community took longer. The Hendersons got their farm back. The Murphy place became a veteran-run sustainable operation. The HOA elected Tom Patterson on a platform of cooperation. We rewrote bylaws to explicitly protect agricultural uses. We started a drought relief cooperative from that well 12 farms used it during the last dry spell. We started a festival. Kids learned hands-on farming. Property values went up oddly enough once the truth was already on the market. What I learned besides how to read boring legal tomes at midnight was this power hides in paperwork, and sometimes the people who wear respectability like armor are the ones who will use it to hurt you. But documentation, community, and patience are weapons too. If you prepare, if you gather your neighbors, if you keep records and tell the truth loudly enough, the law can still be on the side of the small guy. So here I am, mornings still smelling of hay and diesel water flowing clear into troughs, cattle lowing like a small choir of contentment. I check test results, I check cattle, I still keep the old deed in a drawer like a talisman. The federal case closed, restitution paid, festivals scheduled, and sometimes when I walk the fence line at dawn, I hear Delilah's words echoing, "I just wanted the farms gone." Funny thing is, they're not gone. We're still here, stronger. What would you do if your HOA came for the well, keeping your farm alive? Fight, fold, or pay to make them stop? Drop your state and your wildest HOA nightmare below. Tell me if you think justice was served or if the system still scares you. Share your story. I read every comment because this isn't just my fight. It's one we all learn from together.